My name's Travis, and I am your conductor today. I'll also be your historian for this journey back in time. My flagman here on the back helping us today is Andrew, and our engineer today is Jim. The railroad we're traveling over today was originally completed in August of 1859 as the East Tennessee and Georgia Railroad's Chattanooga extension. When built, the East Tennessee and Georgia connected Knoxville, Tennessee and Dalton, Georgia. The only way to get from Knoxville to Chattanooga by rail was to go to Dalton on the ET&G and then turn back north to Chattanooga on the Western and Atlantic Railroad. That changed in August of 1859 with the completion of the Chattanooga extension, connecting Cleveland, Tennessee and Chattanooga. Chattanooga extension construction was funded and overseen by a major stockholder in the company, Colonel James Anderson Whiteside. More about him shortly. In 1894, the Southern Railway took control of this property, and in 1906 raised it up on a field, double-tracked it, and modernized the signal system. That still was not enough for the Southern, however, and on July 5th, 1954, they abandoned the railroad that we're using right now in favor of a new route just to the north, around Missionary Ridge at the head end, bypassing that single-track tunnel on a double-track railroad. That new line off to the right up above us on the hill is still used today by the modern Norfolk Southern Corporation. Off to the left-hand side of the train here, just as we travel along, you may notice that gravel driveway. That gravel driveway is the path of the original 1859 right-of-way. Here in just a moment along that, you will see a piece of reconstructed 5-foot gauge railroad track. You will also see a tree with a yellow stripe painted on it, indicating the high water mark of the flood of 1867, in which the waters of South Chickamauga Creek rose 9 feet over the railroad. We're now crossing over South Chickamauga Creek on our longest and highest bridge at about 65 feet above the water and about 360 feet in length. The next bridge we'll be crossing over is over the Western and Atlantic Railroad. The Western and Atlantic was the very first railroad completed into Chattanooga, being completed in May of 1850. It was built by the state of Georgia, operated by the state of Georgia, and to this day is still owned by the state of Georgia. However, today it is operated by CSX Transportation under a lease agreement. The Western Atlantic Railroad almost did not make it to Chattanooga, however. Being built by the state of Georgia, the state of Tennessee did not want that state road building across their line into their territory. That'd be almost like your neighbor wanting to build a railroad across your property line. You wouldn't exactly want that, would you? Well, that same gentleman that helped to finance the construction of the Chattanooga extension lobbied on behalf of the Western and Atlantic Railroad to the state of Tennessee and the city of Chattanooga and got that railroad permission to build across the state line into downtown Chattanooga. Now, the Western Atlantic Railroad's place in history came in April of 1862 when it played host to the Andrews Raid, or Great Locomotive Chase. 24 Union spies under the command of a civilian by the name of James Andrews began working their way south in April of 1862 with plans to destroy the Western and Atlantic Railroad. Along the way south, 2 men had to drop out and join Confederate units near Jasper, Tennessee, as they were suspected of being Union spies. Then on the morning of their planned raid, April 12, 1862, 2 other men overslept and missed their train ride north. So 18 soldiers and 2 civilians in this group boarded a northbound passenger train in Marietta, Georgia, behind a steam locomotive known as the General. They rode the train north to the town of Big Shanty, today known as Kennesaw, and while the crew and passengers were inside the Lacey Hotel enjoying some breakfast, these men uncoupled the passenger cars, and they illegally borrowed the General and a few freight cars, and they began running north up the W&A Railroad, tearing up track, cutting telegraph wire, and attempting to burn bridges. What they did not count on, however, was the persistence and stubbornness of the conductor, Mr. William Fuller. He started off chasing his stolen train, first by foot, then by pushcart, then on a succession of 3 separate locomotives, finally catching up with the General after a chase of 87 miles. He finally commandeered a locomotive known as the Texas, which he was running in reverse at speeds in excess of 60 miles an hour on a railroad regulated for 15 miles an hour. I think Conductor Fuller was just a little bit mad. He chased these men for 87 miles, dogging them so hard that they did not have enough time to take on enough fuel and water to make it to Chattanooga, and their illegally borrowed locomotive, the General, quite literally ran out of steam 2 miles north of Ringgold, Georgia, about 10 miles to our south. The raiders abandoned the engine and fled into the nearby woods, where within a week, all 24 of these men were captured. They were imprisoned here in Chattanooga, court-martialed in Knoxville, and 8 of them were ultimately hanged as spies in Atlanta. Those 8 men are now buried in Chattanooga's National Military Cemetery, located off of Holtzclaw Avenue, which is the oldest national cemetery in the United States and second largest only to Arlington. The rest of the raiders either escaped from prison or were paroled back to the North in a prisoner of war exchange in 1863. And of these 24 men, 19 of them became the very first recipients of the Medal of Honor. However, as civilians, James Andrews and William Campbell were ineligible for this award. Short but true story of the Andrews Raid or Great Locomotive Chase. If you'd like more information on the Great Locomotive Chase, I recommend visiting the Southern Museum of Civil War and Locomotive History in Kennesaw, Georgia, where you can learn all about the chase, every detail of it, including getting to see the famous locomotive itself, the General. It is preserved and on display in that museum. If you'd also like to read a book about it, I recommend Stealing the General by Russell Bonds, or watching the Walt Disney movie from 1956 entitled The Great Locomotive Chase, starring Fess Parker and Jeff Hunter. Now we're now beginning our climb up Missionary Ridge at this time. Instead of going over it, however, or around it, we are going to go through it. The tunnel we'll be going through is 986 feet in length, 18 feet high, and 12.5 feet wide at its narrowest point. The entrances of the tunnel are shaped like an upside-down horseshoe, and it is one of only a couple of horseshoe tunnels serving active railroads in the state of Tennessee. This tunnel was completely hand-dug. No blasting whatsoever was done in its construction for multiple reasons. Number 1, black powder, when it gets wet, will not detonate. Number 2, dynamite had not yet been invented. And number 3, Missionary Ridge is composed primarily of stratified limestone, which when exposed to moisture deteriorates faster than many other minerals. And there being an underground spring located just above this tunnel construction site that not only rendered powder useless, engineers feared that the limestone in this tunnel area had deteriorated to the point where blasting might cause a total collapse of the tunnel's construction site. So this tunnel was chiseled out of this ridge entirely by hand. 2 crews started digging in 1856, meeting in the middle in 1858, only 3 inches off center, side to side of one another. The tunnel was formally dedicated on August 5th, 1859, and named Whiteside Tunnel after Colonel James Whiteside.
Coming up on a former interlocking up here.
The interior of the tunnel is lined with stacked stone, brick that was made on site during construction and in places is stacked as thick as 11 feet, and natural carved limestone rock. If you'd like to see the walls of the tunnel while we're inside, you can hold the flashlight on your phone up to the window and take a good look at the wall as we pass through. While we are inside this tunnel, there is only about 10 to 15 inches of clearance on either side of this train. Ladies and gentlemen, the sounding of the horn there means we are on approach to historic Whiteside Tunnel. If you're claustrophobic, you're on the wrong train. If you're afraid of the dark, just close your eyes. As we exit the tunnel here, we are in an area known as West Portal. West Portal was where some of the fiercest fighting of the American Civil War Battle of Missionary Ridge took place in November of 1863. It was also the location of a control tower that controlled the switches on either side of the tunnel where the double track began and ended. As many as 70 trains a day would go through this tunnel during World War II, with an average of about 3 to 4 an hour. Then you can see why this was such a major bottleneck for the Southern Railway, and one of the main reasons why they abandoned this line in 1954. Going around the curve here, I'll tell you a little bit about some of the equipment on our train today. The first car directly behind the locomotive today is the 1037. 1037 was built in 1911 by the Pullman Company of Chicago, Illinois, for the Southern Railway as a sleeping car. The Southern Railway rebuilt the car in the 1950s to a 52-seat coach at their shops in Haines, South Carolina. The second car on our train today is the 907. 907 was built in 1947 by American Car and Foundry of St. Charles, Missouri for the Central of Georgia Railway, who used it on a train called the Nancy Hanks II, which operated between Savannah and Atlanta, Georgia. 907 is a former Jim Crow car and was at one time segregated. However, it had its segregating partition removed in 1955 when the Central of Georgia Railroad desegregated. Car number 3 on our train today is the 906, built in 1924 by the Pullman Company for the Central of Georgia Railway, where it saw use on trains such as the Flamingo, the Dixie Limited, the Seminole, and the Man of War. 906 is also a Jim Crow car and still retains its central dividing partition. It is the only Jim Crow car in the United States in operating condition with that partition maintained intact. The reason we leave it intact is one word: history. It is the history of this country, no matter how unpleasant it may be. And a nation that does not preserve, remember, or respect its history is lost and doomed to repeat it. The last car on our train today is the 661. 661 was built in 1947 by American Car and Foundry in St. Charles, Missouri for the Central of Georgia Railroad. It was used on the Nancy Hanks II, just like 907. However, unlike 907, it was not a Jim Crow car, and today is maintained in its original as-delivered configuration as a 56-seat coach. On the left-hand side of the train here in just a moment, you'll see a blue passenger car named the Cross Keys Tavern. Cross Keys is a dining car built in 1937 by American Car for the Louisville and Nashville Railroad and acquired from the Indiana Transportation Museum in 2018. The car is operational and is used periodically. However, it is over here for some general maintenance. That is one of 5 dining cars in our collection, along with cars 899, the Green Bull, 3158 and 3164 and 3307. Once the train comes to a stop, we invite you to exit the train with us and join us down at our turntable here at East Chattanooga, where we will rotate the locomotive on the turntable for our return trip. While we are here at East Chattanooga, we ask you please socially distance yourself from your neighbors, and also please take a look above the seat, above your windows. Please return to the same car and same seats you were in for our return trip to Grand Junction. Ladies and gentlemen, station stop, East Chattanooga.
E unit.